Welcome to today's episode. It's going to be called Sheepskin Stories.
Oh, sheepskin stories. That's exciting. I like it. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. I'll settle in.
Sheepskin Stories.
Should have brought my popcorn.
Well, in part one of the sheepskin discussion, we talked quite a bit about the big picture. Like sheepskin sounds the best, but the cost benefit calculation isn't for everyone.
Right. Sounds great. But it might be a lot of work.
Yeah, for your top grade 1 bands, sheepskin is going to be the way to go. I don't think a band has won the Worlds or even taken a prize without sheepskin for like over 2 decades. I could be wrong. Hit us in the comments if I'm wrong about that, but I can't think of one. Certainly your field marshals, your Inveraries, your SFUs, Scottish Power, Bog Hall. I'm pretty darn sure they're all playing sheep. There's a reason.
One of the situations where even if there is one, that exception will only prove the rule that that's pretty much all the time.
Yep. And then meanwhile, the top soloists aren't usually playing sheep anymore because they've decided that the moisture control systems are worth the negative sound trade-offs, and they still obviously manage to get a great sound. So what we're talking about is very fine points, which to summarize my summary means that for beginners and intermediates, this discussion isn't as relevant as it might be for your advanced players that could actually benefit from that slight increase in quality of sound.
Yeah. And you made the point toward the end of that first episode that I do feel like is worth repeating, that like if even if you reach the top levels of soloing and decide that you need moisture control more than you need the sound of sheep, you probably will have played sheep along the way. And so if you're an intermediate to advanced player, think about having a sheepskin experience, you might say, at least to learn about tone, even if you don't stick with it forever in all cases.
Yeah. What I'd like to do now is get into some of the specifics. We're going to have to talk through them because I don't have my sheepskin bag with me to show you very much, but that's okay. There's a lot to talk about still.
Even if you had it, like, what good is it if you can't like misfrizzle us into the inside of it and like really explore the cell wall and stuff like that? So
yes,
we can imagine along as you teach us.
Yeah. One of the interesting things about sheepskin, like story number 1, is that in my experience, a sheepskin bag can hold air better than any synthetic bag. It's weird, but true. In some cases, you can set up a sheepskin bag so that it's incredibly gobsmackingly airtight, which is cool.
So I've blown up synthetic bags to where they were tight like a balloon and they held really well. So are you saying like a sheepskin bag could hold really well for longer? Would that kind of be the way?
Yeah, like even better. I've seen some really tight sheepskin bags too. Like we're splitting hairs here, but like, but one of the mistakes that I see people make with sheepskin is they don't do a good tie-in on it. So, by the way, that's one of the next costs of a sheepskin bag. It's a big pain in the butt to tie on, and with a $500 investment, you got to know what you're doing when you tie it on. And so, a lot of people wouldn't play sheepskin just because it's tough to install. So, you want to make sure you go to an expert, and then you want to make sure that expert actually ties in that bag really, really well.
Can I share with you a confession I feel like I need to share, Andrew?
Yes.
My friend Alex Kelly years ago bought a hide bag of some kind. So it wasn't sheepskin, probably wasn't that expensive, but no bag is
cut the holes the
cheap.
wrong way?
He got with pre-cut holes. And then he came to me and he was like, hey, you play one of these bags, will you help me tie it in the first time? I was like, you bet.
Sure, no problem, buddy. No problem.
Because I'm sitting here like, I've been tying and retying my Ganaway bag for 9 to 20 years at this point. No problem. I'm an expert. Rather than realizing I've only tied and retied my bag, like no others. So this is a brand new bag. And you know how after you've tied in a hide bag for the first time, the spot where it's tied in, you get like an indent of where the cord goes so you can like retie. It's much easier to retie later. This is a new bag.
Maybe.
My bag had some splits around the holes, like purposely placed little cuts to kind of get things through. So it had kind of a flange. His didn't have that. And so I was trying to get the thing through and I was like, you know what we need to do? We need to cut some splits because that's what my bag has. And it made him nervous. He was like, oh, are you sure? And I was like, I'm sure. And I did it. And here's the thing. I don't know for sure. His bag seemed to be working that day. Hopefully it's still fine. But I have worried since then because I then encountered other people on the internet getting the leather wet instead to achieve the same thing. And I'm
That's
like,
right.
oh, shoot, that's probably what his bag needed. And I cut his expensive brand new bag.
Yeah. If it works, it
There's my
works, right?
confession.
Yeah.
I
So the
hope it
splits.
worked.
But like for me, I would go with a circular cut and then wet the leather so that it'll stretch while you put the stocks through and then tie it in. And then that, like you could almost do that and skip the tie-in. And by the time the leather like collapsed in, it might even hold for you. I don't know. But like by the
Yeah.
time it shrunk up again. But
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, I would do that. But the tie-in needs to be like extremely secure and extremely good. So that's the first thing. And so I have a story time. I used to play in a band, and one year we went to the Worlds, and we were going to do maintenance checks for everybody. And one of the things I do in a maintenance check is I check the stocks of the bag to make sure that they're not going to pop out. By the way, as I say this, it's just making me really nervous about jinxing something. Like, I suppose it's always possible something horrible could happen and a stock could pop out of the bag. But for me, it's something I test every time I season the pipes.
Yeah.
But anyway, apparently not everyone does this. So Carl Donnelly and I were working through the maintenance of this band that we were with on a Scotland trip. And we started testing the stocks. And of the, let's say, 60 or so drones in the band, we must have pulled 20 stocks straight out of the bag.
Oh, man. And like to make it real clear, like you're like taking the bag with one hand, grabbing hold of the stock with the other, and kind of twisting and pulling.
Yep.
And you're saying they're just popping out. They're just popping out like fresh radishes ready to be harvested.
Exactly. So, but
Oh,
what that
man.
means is like, well, the reason you would do that. So I want to twist on those stocks. I want to make sure there's nothing I can do to get that stock out of the bag.
Yeah.
And by the way, when I season my bag for the band, I'm going to do that same check every time. If it pops out, it's no big deal. I could always tie it in. I don't expect it to pop out because I think the tie-in is extremely secure, but I want to know that ahead of time. I don't want to find that out when I get to Scotland.
So just to make super clear, don't do this test on your bagpipes or anyone else's bagpipes when you're like about to march into the circle or something like that.
It needs to
right?
happen. Needs to happen in
At
advance.
that point, it's too late. Yeah, you don't want to go ripping a stock out right before you march in. It might hold, so don't do that then.
Yeah, but you want to make sure, and just give it a once over and just make sure everything's looking good, because the security of the tie-in is extremely important. So that's something you can check. It's something I do all the time. So that's thing number one.
So you pulled 20 stocks out, but you had time to do some retying. It's not like this was.
Yeah, it was about a week. It was maybe a week before the Worlds or something like that.
Would the change in climate have had enough of effect that it might have made things looser? Like if you'd done those, not enough, huh? No excuse.
No, it's just one of those things. And I think in the last episode we were talking about beginner, intermediate sheep players versus advanced. I mean, one of the ways you get to advanced is you go through episodes where your stocks pop out of your bagpipe and it's the most horrendous thing ever. And then, that's one of the things I'm going to check. And for me, I do it every time I season the pipes, which might be a good segue to sheepskin story number 2, which is the basics of seasoning. Maybe we could talk through that.
Are you telling me it's not so simple as just like dump a half a quart into the bag and then keep playing?
Yeah. So a couple of thoughts about seasoning. I have a whole bunch of thoughts. Thought number 1 is the most important seasoning that you ever do with your sheepskin bag is fill in the blank.
The wet kind.
Good try. Thank you for playing. But the most important one by far is the first seasoning.
Oh, I see.
So,
like when you get the bag brand new.
Yep. When you get the bag brand new, the first seasoning is the most important. When I first get the bag and I tie it in, the first thing I do usually with a standard sheepskin bag is I usually massage it a little bit to get the leather loosened up. And in moderation, I also massage the seam of the bag. So it gives that seam a little bit of flexibility so that it can receive the seasoning. When you first season the pipes, and
it just sounds
thereafter,
like such a ritual. Like I could imagine this could figure into like the bagpipe religion someday, centuries from now. Like you must massage the bag that it may receive the seasoning from above.
Yeah, exactly. Like for me, I do it for a non-religious reason. For me, it's just like I'm thinking about that seam, and that the seam on the bottom of the bag, that's where the majority of air is going to leak from, right?
Yeah.
Is the seam. because that's, it wasn't connected and they had to sew it together. And some bag makers, maybe all, I honestly don't know. I think they put glue in there in the seam to help things, come together and so on. But it's the seasoning that's going to do the heavy lifting in keeping that airtight. So in moderation, massaging of the seam and massaging of the leather, and then I'm going to tie that bag in. And then the first seasoning is very important. And the first seasoning is going to be a large quantity of seasoning. And then here's, for me, the secret. One of the secrets is that seasoning has to be absolutely so hot, especially on the first seasoning, right? Like, if not boiling, then like really close to boiling.
Sounds dangerous. I wouldn't have thought of that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Do you feel like it does something to the leather, or is it just that it makes it extra liquidy so it can really get into every crack?
Right. It might do something to the leather, but in my mind, I'm imagining it being so hot that it's like less viscous and it can get into teeny weeny little pores really effectively.
So just as close to water as it could possibly get in terms of how it flows.
Yeah. And it's super hot. Okay, so it can get into all the nooks and crannies. And
is this a two-person job? Like my safety alarm bells are going off. Can you handle this okay on your own?
I think it'll be fine. Yeah. You're going to be fine.
Oven mitts?
Yeah.
Tongs, maybe?
You could wear eye protection. Might not be the worst idea because I'm not done yet. So the first seasoning, super hot. I'm going to dump that seasoning in the bag, probably close to half a can of seasoning in there. Like it's going to be plenty. And I know I'm going to have lots of excess. And then I'm going to rub that super hot seasoning everywhere in the bag. Okay. And then we want to massage along all the seams. The other spot you got to watch out for is all around the tie-in itself. We want to make sure that there's ooey gooey seasoning every possible surface, but like close to where the tie-ins are, those spots tend to get missed. We want to make sure it gets down into the neck of the bag as well. And we're going to massage it in. I'm not done yet, Jim, but it sounds like you have a thought.
Oh no, just it makes sense to me that like the tie-in area would get missed, because if it's kind of messy, you don't want to get like extra gloop on the outside of the bag. So you would avoid those little lips, those little parts there. But
it's definitely going to be very messy inside the bag for the first seasoning. When we're done, we're going to want to clean out the stocks really carefully and so on to make sure that there's not sticky crap all over it. Okay. But like for that first seasoning, we're going a little crazy. It's like super hot.
Maybe it's only me that finds this clarification useful, but to be clear, you've got stocks in the bag while you're doing the seasoning.
Oh yeah.
All stocks are present.
Oh yeah. They have to be.
So you get it.
Yeah.
You get it. You tie it in. Maybe you massage it and then tie it in, but you tie it in and then you start pouring in seasoning.
Yep. So you'll massage the bag first, then you'll tie it in, then you'll cork everything up very tight. Then you'll pour the seasoning in. I like to cork that up as well. Like the bag would be deflated fully, but you're going to put the cork in just so you don't make a huge seasoning mess everywhere. When it comes out. But now I'm putting in the super hot seasoning in there. And I'm doing the thing. Once I've rubbed all the seasoning in, what I'm next going to do is I'm going to take my blowpipe. I'm going to put it in the blowpipe stock. By the way, I might have to clean out that blowpipe stock because it has seasoning all over it. You got to apply common sense rule to everything I say here. And then right away, while everything is still wicked hot. And by the way, there's still tons of excess seasoning in there. Okay. Like just leave everything in there. I'm going to blow the bag up, and I'm going to blow it up as tight as I could possibly make it. And what you'll find is the bag is already semi-miraculously extremely airtight. Okay. But during this first seasoning, and remember, like this all happens in a fairly short time. Everything's still boiling hot. I blow the bag up as tight as I possibly can. And then I get down on the ground. Okay. And I kneel on the bag.
Oh yeah. I remember watching you do this in a video. Yeah.
Yep. I kneel on the bag, and I'm a big guy. I kneel on that bag. By the way, you got to make sure your corks are in there tight, in with a twist, because this is where you can end up spraying seasoning all over the place. But yeah, I'm going to kneel down on the bag, and I bounce up and down on that sucker. Sounds crazy, but the reason I do that is I've got the seasoning coating all the inside of the bag. Now I want to put more force, more pressure inside the bag, like way more than we'll ever have when we're actually playing the pipes. It's never going to get that high, but I'm going to do that, and I'm going to bounce up and down. And in my mind, I'm picturing the seasoning, the hot, super liquidy seasoning. I'm really forcing it in to every possible pore as deeply as I reasonably can. I do
Yeah.
that every time I season my pipes, but it's ultra important the first time you season to do that.
I feel like that makes intuitive sense. I don't think I ever would have imagined doing it if it hadn't been for seeing you do it in a video, Andrew. But like, as I try to imagine magic school busing my way into the inside of the bag while this is happening, like thinking about my own skin, like if I stretch it, that kind of opens pores up in little tiny, microscopic cracks and stuff like that. And so if that's the same situation inside the bag, you're stretching that out, getting that seasoning really deep in there on a, would it be a cellular level? Maybe not quite that tight, but pretty tight.
Maybe, but who knows? I don't know. The other thing that comes to mind as we talk about this is don't panic if a little bit of seasoning bubbles out of the seam of the bag. Do panic if the seasoning bubbles out of any of your tie-ins that you've done. So if it's bubbling out around the stocks, bad. Do panic. It might mean we need to retie that stock. But the seam of the bag where it's been stitched.
Yeah.
I find it's quite common to have some little seasoning bubbles bubble out of that during the first seasoning. And don't panic. Because what's going to happen next is we're going to hang the bag up and leave it out to drain. After the first seasoning, I'm going to drain it for probably 24 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours. Just let it drain. Let it do its thing. And what's going to happen naturally over time is all the seasoning that we've worked into unknown crevices and cracks inside the bag, it's going to start to harden up. Okay. And that is going to be our safeguard against any future leaks. So if there's a little bubble in the seam, it's good. That means the seasoning is in there. And once it hardens up, that seam is going to be extremely reliable for the entire lifespan of the bag. Again, knock on wood. God, I hope I'm right about this. But this is my routine, right?
Well, that makes sense. That reminds me, like, as a person with kids, of course, I spend a lot of time fixing bikes. And I always end up putting that goop stuff into my kids' bikes because, of course, they're riding over, little goat heads and stuff like that are poking holes in their tires. And when there is a hole, you'll see that goop stuff bubble up out of the hole. That means it's doing what it's supposed to. It's going to seal that hole. I want it to bubble through. That's how it gets sealed up.
Goat heads? What does that mean?
Oh, maybe that's a local name. These weeds that have these spiky, they're seeds, but they're really spiky, sharp and hard enough to go through a bike tire. They're really common out here. I don't know if they're common everywhere, but they do look, if you hold it up and look at it, it looks kind of like a goat head with scary little horns and pointy ears as well because it's got spikes that go in different directions.
Gotcha.
Stickers, what other word
Nails?
comes to mind for them? Nails, yeah. Organic nails.
Okay, so anyway, seasoning, we're going to hang it up to dry 24 hours. By the way, I should be able to play my pipes the next day. Here's the next thought that comes to mind. It's normal in the first couple weeks of the lifespan of a sheepskin bag to need to season it a couple more times in that first couple of weeks. Like
So
I
don't
feel like
put
the
your seasoning
leather
away yet.
Yeah, and like don't be alarmed if 2 or 3 days in your bag's not holding air that well. Like give it another, not a half can this time. It would be much lesser amount, but give it a little bit of seasoning and go through the seasoning routine again. So super hot seasoning, get it in there, rub it on everything, find those spots that you might have missed, do the seam again, rub the seam, bounce up and down on it with all of your weight, and then it'll hold air again. But in the first couple weeks, it's normal for it to require a couple of more seasonings. However, after that, you should be able to, if you play regularly, you should be able to go long periods of time without needing a seasoning. Don't season every week, right? Don't go crazy.
You'll shorten the life of the bag unnecessarily if you do that, won't you?
Every time, like the way I think about it, and I mean this generally, not literally and not crazy personally, okay? But like generally speaking, every time you season the bag, you're decreasing its lifespan. Generally speaking. So generally speaking, we want to be as minimal as reasonably possible with the seasoning. That's going to help stretch the lifespan of it. The main reason your bag needs to be seasoned is because you let it dry out for 3 months.
Yeah.
Right. And now it's just a barren desert in there.
Do you feel like if you're keeping up with playing it regularly and everything, you're going to reach a point still though where you're going to need to reapply seasoning? When you are aware of that, Andrew, for you, is it like it's kind of like oil changes on a car. Are you a mileage person or a months person? Do you go every 6 months or every 5,000 miles?
You
With
go
your
as
bag,
needed. You go as needed.
so you like feel it. You kind of go like, oh, it feels a little leaky. Things feel different. Of course, if you're
Yes.
playing every day, you're going to notice that. And that's your signal to go, I'm going to add a little seasoning.
So your first maintenance check is always going to be, is my bag airtight? Which means every now and then you'll cork that puppy up and see if it's still holding air really well. And then when you do that and it's not, that could be a good sign that you're due for a seasoning. So I would only do it if it needs it. I would never do it if it doesn't need it. With one exception, which is I might give it a little shot of seasoning, even if it doesn't completely need it, like 2 weeks or so before an extremely major event.
Just to make sure it's in tip-top shape for that
Yeah,
event.
for a couple of reasons. Number one is I think a little seasoning, I think it probably does actually help with the handling of moisture and so on, right? The other thing is 2 weeks before a big event is like the absolute last chance. So if you discover that it needs seasoning, but it's 3 days before the event, you're kind of screwed.
It's too late. Yeah.
Yeah. So you do a precautionary, like planning seasoning usually, like 2 weeks before the Worlds maybe, and then 2 weeks before anything big that you really care about. Just because it's going to be your last chance, I think, is the main reason.
That seems like a good pro tip.
And my last thought would be storage matters. So what you're doing when you're not playing your pipes is extremely important.
So we should all build a huge humidor that we can keep our bagpipes in.
So, well, you laugh, but that's basically what I've been doing over the last year or so, and it's worked really well. But you don't have to go crazy, but you want to monitor the environment that you're storing your pipes in. If you're storing your pipes in an extremely dry environment, that's bad for sheep. Okay?
If it's bad for sheep, it's bad for bagpipes.
That's right. Well, it's bad for people who play sheepskin for sure. Like if you have a Ross canister system, you can kind of store your pipes in a dry climate and it doesn't matter.
Do what you want. Yeah.
Right. But if it's extremely dry, you got to start to worry for sheepskin. And by the way, extremely wet would also be bad. Throwing it out there.
Yeah.
You know, I have those hygrometers that I keep hanging around.
Mm-hmm.
And like between 40 and 70% humidity is like the storage zone. 40 would be the low end and 70 would be the high end. But like if my pipes are in that kind of environment, I'm usually okay to kind of leave them with the case open and just let them do their thing. But then much below that or above that, I start to get a little bit nervous. And it can dry the pipes and that's going to take things longer to settle in the next day. But it might also dry things out and dry the seasoning out so that you have to season more often and so on. So it seems complicated, but it's not. You know, just make sure that the environment that you're storing your pipes in is higher humidity.
It seems like maybe also a lot of these, maybe especially the method for doing seasoning, are going to be applicable to other hide bags as well. Does it seem like these are kind of generally best practices, or is a lot of this very specific to sheep?
Yes, I would say yes. The exception to that rule is the Ganaway. They have the synthetic glycerin-based seasoning, and they also have that primer. And so like that's a different maybe seasoning experience that you just got to think through a little bit and trial and error a few things. Like the primer is primarily what you use to get the Ganaway airtight. And then that glycerin seasoning is more like a backup for airtightness and helps manage the moisture. So it's kind of like a two-tiered thing.
Yeah, shampoo and conditioner.
Shampoo and conditioner. Yeah. And then sometimes a Ganaway, you want to reprime it. But like you kind of need to think about that. And do you need to clean out the inside of the bag first with like a rag and then let it dry and do stuff to it before you reprime it? Like that's all stuff you want to think about. Maybe ask the Ganaway people or maybe it's in the instructions already what they recommend. So the Ganaway is weird, but for most other hide bags, it's going to be pretty much the same vibe. Goat skin bag, same vibe. Elk skin. That I don't think you can do kangaroo anymore.
Yeah. Well, I'm not here to like pitch any specific bag maker, but I'm just saying my personal experience. If you're not doing sheep, give Ganaway a try because my personal experience has been pretty darn good.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm very impressed by how long this thing's lasted. So go Ganaway.
For sure. In the RMM pipe band days, when we were doing that, like all of the kids were on the Ganaway. It's a good bag and it gets a great tone. and it gets that high stability and tone that we're looking for, but it's way less expensive. And I mean expensive not just in terms of money. It's way less expensive in terms of all the trade-offs than the sheep. So you're right about that.
If I'm allowed to stretch my Linux analogy just a little bit here, then I would say something like, if Sheepskin is the Linux of pipe bags, then maybe Ganaway is the Apple operating system of pipe bags, in that it's basically, it's built off of like a Linux kernel, right? So it's like, that idea, but they also have like really prescriptive like products you have to use with that bag. But if you do that, if you function within their ecosystem, it'll last a long time. It'll do good work for you.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, yeah, I like the Ganaway. It's cool.
I'll probably delete that in the edit. Honestly, that was dumb.
That's pretty weak. That's pretty weak, Jim. No, I think you should leave it in. Let the people see that you are mortal. I think this analogy overall is like, I think maybe not the best.
Yeah,
it's all about trade-offs, right? Like it's all about trade-offs, and everything has a trade-off. There is no magic solution.
No free lunch.
Right?
That's like funny. My father-in-law is a biologist at a local university, and that is one of his favorite. He brings that up pretty often. Like whenever there's like miracle drugs or surgeries or anything like that, or he's always like, look, that might be beneficial, but there's nothing free, like there's always going to be a trade-off. So don't fall for it.
The laws of physics are not going to change.
Right?
One way to beat the system is to play a sheepskin bag in 98-degree weather at 100% humidity. Right? If you did that, your bagpipes would never change and they would always sound sublime. You'd sweat your butt off. You got to make sure you hydrate if you're going to do that.
Yeah, that trade-off that's a couple bridges too far for me, man. Yeah, no way.
Yeah, it's pretty tough. Scotland is a really nice, humid environment, but it's cool. And so you're going to get a lot of condensation when playing your bagpipes in Scotland. It's just the way that it works, and so you can play a moisture control system, but that tends to dry out the entire internal system of the bag. And then the chantery doesn't sound very good in a dry environment, right? Like it needs that moisture in there for the cane to vibrate freely. And so there's trade-offs. The trade-off with the moisture control system is you lose resonance and you lose depth because you're monkeying around with the embouchure inside the bag. And you're monkeying around with that cocktail of heat and moisture that, the bagpipes were designed to operate best with. Think about it. All woodwind instruments that we know of, they operate at 100% humidity and approximately 100 degrees Fahrenheit, like body temperature and 100% humidity, give or take. We've all heard the myth of the wet versus dry blowers, and maybe there's something to that, maybe there's not. But basically speaking, if you play a clarinet, right, you're putting your mouth on it and you're blowing 100-degree fully saturated air into that instrument, right? And by the way, the bagpipe works the same way after a time, right? It takes time to get that there, but then the bagpipe works the same way. With the moisture control system, you're messing around with that. You might never get to fully saturated air inside the moisture control system. It's certainly going to take much, much longer. So that means things are going to take much, much longer to stabilize. And I'm not just saying that. I mean, hopefully it makes sense. That explanation hopefully makes sense when you listen to it. It's like, yes, you're putting a box full of desiccant that's by design supposed to extract moisture from the air. So the drone reeds are going to stay dry, but that box is also going to extract moisture from the entire system inside the bag. So that means it's going to take longer for your bag to reach equilibrium of 100 degrees and 100% humidity. That's the equilibrium that we need to reach in order for the bagpipes to become stable. And then once you reach that, which by the way takes a lot longer now, so it's going to take 30 minutes to 40 minutes or something for that to happen inside your moisture control system, right? But now you're on borrowed time. That means the desiccant inside the bag has gotten wet enough to allow that environment to stabilize, which means that your drone reeds are going to get wet eventually anyway. It does, like the moisture control system obviously does give you a lot longer, but man, that's a complicated trade-off. I find when I play my moisture control bagpipe for solo P-Brocky type purposes, it takes a lot longer for the bagpipes to become fully stable. It's tricky.
Yeah.
Some people play purposely with slightly wet rocks
Oh yeah, just kind of shorten that timeline a bit.
As you shorten the timeline a little
Yeah.
bit. Some people put fresh rocks on the back and old rocks on the front. Like,
Wow.
yeah, like
Interesting.
there's all sorts of, there's all sorts of different variations. But the bottom line is it's more complicated to get the bagpipe to get stable in that situation.
Right. Which, to be clear, is like by design. Like this might be exactly the effect you're looking for. Like we've talked about before. Like maybe being able to play longer is exactly what you want.
Do you want to play longer or do you want to play better? I honestly think that's part of the question. So like a sheepskin bag, if done well, between minutes 15 and 25, you're going to sound totally sublime. But I find with the moisture control system, you can play a lot longer sounding really good. But like to get to sublime takes potentially a very long exhausting period of time. Even so, it's not the same sublime that you can get with sheep. So that becomes the question. Do I want to endure 30 minutes of not sublime for 30 minutes of almost sublime? Or do I want to play for 10 minutes and then be sublime for 10 to 15 minutes and then I've run out of time?
Yeah, I guess it depends on your situation, doesn't it? Like maybe
does.
the former is more attractive.
The former is definitely why grade 1 bands play sheep and cane, right? Because they do about 15 minutes of playing time. By the way, that time is spread out usually, but it's like 15 to 20 minutes of prep time and hopefully get to sublime right when you hit the line. And then you blast a set with sublime tone. That's the game.
Mm-hmm.
If you can do it. And by the way, then you try and do it a couple times per day at the Worlds.
Yeah.
And it's like extra hard and that's all just theory. That's all just theory. At the end of the day, you got to try to walk the walk, and at the end of the day, almost sublime is typically better than 96% of your competitors. So like it's really only urgent at the absolute highest levels.
Yeah.
It's really that the decision making really only becomes super important at the highest levels. But then you might be asking, well, if I'm not at the highest of levels, which option should I pick?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, like well, I'm certainly interested in getting that sparkle that you described about sheepskin bags. They're like, cool, I want to sound sparkly, but then you describe all the work, and I'm like, well, it might not be for me right now.
Would you recognize it if you achieved it?
I might not. That's the thing. Like we talked a few weeks ago, we talked about how like I'd recorded myself playing Pibroch of Donald Do, and only then did I realize that I was surging like crazy when I went up to the high A in the first part.
Yeah.
And if I wasn't noticing that, then I'm probably not going to notice the sparkles.
You're right, Jim. You're exactly right. So where does the trade-off put us for most people? And for me, like what I would advise is that a pure beginner play a synthetic bag, like a rigid synthetic bag is what a beginner should do. And then what an intermediate should do, or someone who is expected to become intermediate soon, like let's say a young kid or something, where how young kids tend to progress fast, right? So I might not start them on synthetic if I have a chance to supervise them and help them and whatever. Like if they're in my juvenile band that I'm teaching, or if it were my own kid, I'd probably start them on a Ganaway, right? Just because like a Ganaway is a good intermediate bag that gets you the hide experience.
Nice. Well put.
Right. And then intermediate verging on advanced, I would go sheepskin until you can't anymore. And that might be like, and by the way, you can all the way through grade 1 solos. Like I'm just picturing grade 1 soloists. Like with the exception of the tip of the grade 1 spear, where, you're about to go pro and stuff like that. Like you can play a Pibroch on sheep. It can be done, you guys. And I highly recommend it. So you can play sheepskin in pro. You just, at some point, you'll start to think to yourself, the way forward here is to now explore moisture control systems, right? But that's only at the ultra high advanced levels where I personally would recommend it. And I know for a fact that many of my peers in the world of bagpipe teaching will disagree with that, but that's just where I'm at. And we've had some discussion here where you can maybe understand where I'm coming from on that at this point.
Yeah.
I know for a fact that there's tons of good teachers out there who know what they're doing, who are going to strap you on that moisture control way earlier in the process. I just think the trade-offs aren't there for that. I think it's not quite right.
I'm imagining that probably a common explanation for doing that would be something like, this is a beginner. We want them to get in as much play time as possible, and this moisture control system will allow them to play for a really long time.
Right. And moisture is awful, right? Like if you get even a single bead of moisture on your drone reeds, it's all over.
Stop then.
I'm being sarcastic. That's not true.
Yeah.
Like if our drone reeds never get wet, then we never learn what the effects of moisture are. By the way, the effects of moisture are largely positive. How are you going to learn?
Yeah,
that?
I keep thinking to myself how funny it is that like with bagpipes, like we want things to be wet, just not too wet. No, it's like right. The moisture control system thing. It's like, well, the benefit is that it keeps your reeds dry, but the downside is your reeds don't get wet. We want this like perfect middle ground that's so hard to achieve.
And then if you think it through, right? If you think it through, what we want is 100 degrees and 100% humidity. That's what we want. Because until we're there, our bagpipes are not going to be stable. Specifically, our chanter reed is not going to be stable until it's 100 degrees and 100% humidity inside that bag. So that's what we want. What is it that we actually don't want? It's not moisture.
We don't want to go beyond that point.
No, that's not even it. You can't, first of all, you can't go beyond 100% humidity, right? But
maybe we're going at the same thing as...
Jim, let me finish my thought. You're killing me here. The thing that we really care about is not moisture, it's condensation. That's the real thing that we're trying to avoid. Condensation is the killer of your drone reeds.
Yeah.
Right? That's the real thing that we need to manage. It's not, by the way, what does air going through that desiccant do? It causes friction. So it's actually heating up the air quite significantly. So the air that's reaching your drones is actually far hotter. So actually what we might be doing there is not so much keeping things dry, but we might actually be changing the dew point, allowing us more time before condensation forms on the reed.
Yeah. Interesting.
That's what might actually be going on there. So like, and I don't know this. I've gone crazy. I'm going crazy now, Jim. It's getting crazy talk here, but like, is it possible that your desiccant becomes fully saturated? Like when your pipes actually do reach the sublime-ish point when you're playing moisture control, is it possible that your rocks have actually become fully moist, right? And they're not actually filtering out any moisture anymore, but all they're doing is providing that friction and that warmer air to the reeds and the surrounding area around the reeds, prohibiting condensation from forming. And I think the answer could possibly be yes. But it's funny because that's what, if you ever feel the box, so play your moisture control system for a while and then grab the Ross canister box or whatever, you'll feel it's quite warm. And that's from, obviously your breath is warm, okay, for sure. But also there's friction there. You're pushing air through a really tightly constricted space that's going to cause heat, and it does.
Makes me wonder about throwing hand warmers into the bag or something like that. Just see what happens.
Yeah, well, hand warmers would heat things up to a small degree, right? And then the warmer the surface area is, the less likely you'll get condensation, right? Yeah. And then I forget exactly. I there was a time where I looked at all those tables to figure out when condensation is going to form. But interestingly, right? If you're 100, okay, which means 100 degrees Fahrenheit and 100% humidity inside the bag. By the way, I'm rounding up. I get it. I get it, everybody. 98.6, got it. But like 100, right? That's where we need to get to for things to be stable. But what's the dew point when it's 100 degrees and 100% humidity? Like at what temperature does water begin to condense on surfaces?
When it's 100 degrees outside of the bagpipes, you're saying?
Well, my point is the dew point when you're at 100% humidity is the temperature.
Yeah.
So if any of the surfaces inside your bag are cooler than the temperature of the air, then condensation will begin to occur.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and so then if you have something that's making it so the inside of the bag is 110 degrees,
you're guaranteeing more condensation because the surface area of your pipes, right, is going to now be affected by the outside environment. So if it's 110 degrees inside the bag and 100% humidity, that means anything less than 110 degrees will start to extract moisture from the air and turn it into condensation. So you actually would want to lower the temperature inside the bag, I think, to prohibit condensation. Maybe
I might be getting tight in knots now, because now I'm like, oh, and then that makes it seem like if there's heat coming from the canister system, it's actually going to make the dew point happen sooner.
Right. So maybe I'm wrong.
But it also might just be that I've been trying to picture too many things for too long and my brain's too tired.
Or maybe hot air, or maybe the hot air that's coming through is prohibiting the surfaces from cooling as well. Right.
And so if the surfaces can't cool, then condensation doesn't gather. Is that the idea there?
Yeah, I think that's why condensation tends to form first at the top of your drones. Right? It's because they're fully exposed to the elements. So if you picture a cold day, right, like your pipes and the surface area of those pipes are probably going to be affected more by the bag itself and by your body, and so they stay a little bit warmer. But as you go up, let's say in the base drone, it's like that's fully exposed to the elements, right? And there's air coming in, and so the actual surface area up there is cooler, and that's why it condenses up there first, right?
Yeah. It can be confusing when playing outdoors in the snow, because you might think that the moisture at the top is from snow landing on the drones, and it might well be.
It's not. No, it's not.
But there's warm air coming out, and I've taken a flashlight before after doing an outdoor gig like that, and you can see just like, what do you call them, rivulets, like lines where the droplets of water have gathered and run down the length of my drone.
Yep. That's the reason why, like when top grade 1 bands are warming up, you keep the brushes handy. And I continually brush the tops of my drones for 2 reasons. Number one, I can kind of monitor how much condensation I'm getting because that's where it's going to form first. So like, you kind of know the point where it's like, ooh, okay, we're getting some condensation now. But the other reason is if you can prohibit beads from forming there and running all the way down into your reeds, you want to, right? But anyway, we've been waxing a long time about this, Jim. And
what have we been talking about?
It's all about trade-offs, and there's no magic pill. And I talked about sort of beginner, intermediate, advanced, super advanced. Start synthetic, then go Ganaway and sheepskin, then your active moisture control systems.
If you so choose, right?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Like maybe that's what Andrew's thinking right now. Could that change? It could definitely change.
You'll hear about it here first, folks.
It's frustrating when the products are pushed on the beginner. Well, you're going to need the drone valves and you're going to need the moisture control and you're going to need all that stuff. And are we just pushing that because it gets you more out of the sale of the pipes to the beginner? Maybe. But you're also dumping a whole bunch of stuff on people who are a long way away from understanding any of the trade-offs that we discussed.
Yeah.
Right? So
it's a lot more variables for them to worry about too.
Yeah. Simple setup, rigid bag in order to get the good strike-ins, but like super simple setup, rigid bag. That's what we want, I think, for a beginner. If any of this is resonating with you, maybe rip out that moisture control and those tone enhancers and, go spend $150 on a rigid synthetic bag and rebuild your sound. Highly recommend it. Will you get some moisture? Yeah, you will. Yeah. But what does that mean? Does that mean it's the apocalypse? Usually not until a lot of moisture forms. Then you start to run into big problems. But that takes a while. So give it a try. Jim, I'm stopping this recording.
Deal.
We're doing it. We're done. I wonder where you put me today. The green screen,
It's going to be fun.
Hey, everybody. Andrew Douglas here from the Piper's Dojo, and I just want to say thanks so much for listening to today's iteration of the podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard here today, it would be super helpful to us and to a lot of bagpipers out there trying to find us. If you could give us a top-notch review on whatever platform you're using to listen to this podcast, particularly Apple, iTunes, and Spotify and things like that, your review would be really, really helpful. So if you have a moment today, definitely go over there and help us out. Other than that, until we meet again on the podcast or somewhere else, thanks again for listening.